Welcome to the Described World channel. In the Old Testament, there are numerous characters that are often overlooked or rarely discussed in videos, especially those shrouded in mystery. Some of these characters are only briefly mentioned without their names being revealed. However, in ancient writings and books from different biblical canons, we can find more detailed information about these characters. In this video, we will delve into the history of Ham's wife, exploring her origins and curious qualities. This is another episode in our series on the matriarchs of humanity. Don't forget to like and keep watching the video. Ham's wife, the mother of African peoples, is the focus of our discussion. Returning to the topic of the wives aboard Noah's Ark, we are exploring the wives of Noah's 3 sons. We will share information about Ham's wife and the role she played in the survival of humanity. These women, who were aboard Noah's Ark, were part of Noah's family who survived the Great Flood, as narrated in the book of Genesis. This chapter of the Bible is a fascinating account of bravery and survival. Although the Bible does not mention the names of these women, their existence is confirmed in Genesis 6:18, when God said to Noah, "But with you I will establish my covenant. You shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives." In this way, we are exploring the account of the women aboard the ark. In ancient Jewish tradition, we find a remarkable manuscript called the Book of Jubilees. This fascinating and extremely ancient text presents a history of Genesis and Exodus, supplementing the biblical account with additional details such as genealogies, names, precise dates, specific calendars, and the history of the patriarchs. It also addresses the religious ordinances and laws observed by the ancient Israelites. Although the Book of Jubilees is not considered canonical by most Jewish traditions and is not included in the standard Jewish or Christian canon, it is valued by some Jewish communities. It is regarded as an important text for understanding religious thought and the history of Judaism in the Second Temple period. The book has been preserved in various languages and manuscripts, including Ethiopian, Greek, and Latin. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church considers this book canonical, and it is also valued by Jews converted to Judaism, known as Beta Israel or Falashes. Many of these converts are descendants of Jews but also have African roots, particularly from the descendants of Cush. Jubilees, we find the names of the wives of each of Noah's sons. Ham's wife, for example, is called Nelt Tumok. In this manuscript, she is described as the mother of many peoples, including African peoples and other groups with origins related to Ham. Nelt Tumok is remembered as the matriarch of African peoples, and her descendants spread throughout the continent, giving rise to various cultures and civilizations. Her legacy is deeply rooted in African history, influencing traditions, languages, and connections to the land throughout generations. According to the Silene oracles, Nelt enjoyed extraordinary longevity, living for centuries upon centuries. This was due to the fact that she belonged to a pre-Diluvian generation, born before the Great Flood. During that time, people had incredibly long life expectancies, with some living up to an impressive 900 years. Ham's wife, Nelt Tumok, lived for many centuries, and during this extended period, she uttered several remarkable prophecies. According to the Silene oracles, all 3 wives of Noah's sons were prophetesses and made predictions for their generations and the nations descended from them. Nelt Tumok, like the other wives, played a significant role in transmitting prophecies to her descendants. In Christian traditions dating from the 2nd century after Christ, a text known as the Syriac Tarim provides additional insights. The Syriac Tarim, also known as Tarim Pseudo Jonathan or Taram Yami II, is a translation or paraphrase of the Old Testament in Aramaic, erroneously attributed to Jonathan ben Uzziel. Unlike better-known Targums like Targum Onkelos for the Pentateuch and Targum Jonathan for the prophets, the Syriac Tarim primarily focuses on the historical books of the Old Testament. It is believed that the Syriac Tarim was composed sometime between the 6th and 9th centuries. While it is not widely used in Jewish or Christian contexts today and is relatively less known compared to other Targums, it provides interesting insights into the interpretation and translation of the Bible in antiquity. It can be a valuable resource for scholars wishing to explore the literary and cultural traditions of Judaism during the time it was produced. Furthermore, the Christian writer known as Saint Hippolytus also mentions a tradition, but he changes the names of the wives of Ham and Japheth to other names. In this tradition, Ham's wife's name would be Zedit-Nabu. Therefore, according to this tradition, Zedit-Nabu would be Ham's wife. It's truly fascinating to note that, in Christian traditions, there is an ancient legend related to Ham's wife during the time of the flood. According to this legend, God instructed Noah to destroy the first person who announced the beginning of the flood. This reimagined story adds an intriguing layer to the narrative, highlighting the significance of Ham's wife in the events surrounding the flood. It prompts us to contemplate the role of these often overlooked characters and their contributions to biblical history. At that particular moment, Ham's wife was engrossed in the task of baking bread. As she diligently attended to the oven, a sudden rush of water burst forth, wreaking havoc on the bread she had been preparing. Startled by the unexpected turn of events, she passionately exclaimed that the flood had begun. With a mixture of fear and urgency, she raised her voice and declared to all within earshot that the deluge, foretold by God, was now underway. According to a Christian tradition that has persisted for centuries, God, upon hearing Ham's wife's proclamation, made the decision to rescind his earlier command. The purpose behind this reversal was to prevent Noah from inadvertently causing harm to his own daughter-in-law. In other words, God did not want any member of Noah's own family, who was on the verge of becoming ill, to be destroyed in the cataclysmic flood that was about to engulf the world. This intriguing anecdote has captivated the curiosity of those who study Christian traditions and can be found in the book of Genesis, specifically in chapter 10, as well as in the book of Jubilees. Ham's wife, mentioned briefly in the biblical accounts, had the privilege of bearing 4 sons with Ham: Cush, Mra, Put, and Canaan. It is worth noting that the first 3 sons of Ham and his wife, namely Cush, Mra, and Put, went on to give rise to various nations primarily located in the African region. However, Canaan, the 4th son, did not become the progenitor of African peoples. Instead, he was the ancestor of the Canaanites, also known as the ancient Phoenicians of the Middle East. These Canaanites would later become enemies and rivals of the Israelites for many centuries. Despite Canaan not being the central focus of the biblical narrative, his name became associated with the land of Canaan itself. This land is often mentioned as the region that would eventually become the inheritance of the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob after their journey there. The land of Canaan encompassed geographic areas that are now part of modern-day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and Jordan. It is fascinating to observe how these biblical accounts and ancient legends shed light on the history and origins of different ethnic groups and cultures. Among the ethnic groups that trace their lineage back to Ham's sons, the Sumerians played a prominent role. Notably, the Sumerian civilization had its roots in the descent from Cush, one of Ham's sons. The Sumerians, who were primarily located in Mesopotamia, made significant contributions to human civilization. Nimrod, a Sumerian pioneer, is described in the Bible as a mighty man on earth. He is credited with founding several ancient cities in the Mesopotamian region, including Babel, Erech, and Calneh. Nimrod's influence and the Sumerians' descent from Cush shaped the course of history in that region. Additionally, a significant portion of the local population in that region had Semitic origins, including the Akkadians, Chaldeans, Assyrians, Syrians, and Arameans. It is interesting to note that the Sumerians, with their ancestral ties to Cush, were distinct from these Semitic peoples. The ancient Egyptians, on the other hand, were descendants of Mra, one of Ham's sons through his wife. Mra is often associated with the region that would eventually become Egypt in biblical and historical traditions. The term Mra is even used in some Bible translations as an alternate name for Egypt. While Mra is not a central figure in biblical theology, his association with Egypt holds historical significance. Egypt played a significant role in the ancient Near East and is frequently mentioned in the Bible in relation to events such as the enslavement of the Israelites in the Exodus, led by Moses. Another notable people descended from Ham's wife through her son Mra are the ancient Nubians, who were often referred to as Cush in antiquity due to their connection to Cush, one of Ham's sons. The land of Cush is mentioned in several passages of the Bible, and the Cushites are frequently mentioned in historical and geographical contexts, especially in relation to Egypt. It is important to highlight that the ethnicities of Ethiopia, as well as the peoples of Eritrea, Somalia, and the entire African continent, have their roots in the descent from Ham's wife and Ham himself. It is crucial to emphasize that the mistaken interpretation of the curse of Canaan as something that fell upon Africans is both false and harmful. This misinterpretation was invented by individuals who did not correctly understand the biblical text. It is essential to clarify that the curse of Canaan is not related to African peoples but rather to the Canaanite people of the Middle East, specifically from the land of Canaan. Incorrectly associating this curse with Africans is a distortion and a miscontextualized interpretation of the Bible. The curse of Canaan. I apologize, but it seems that my previous response was cut off. I was about to explain the curse of Canaan. The curse of Canaan is mentioned in the book of Genesis, specifically in chapter 9, after the account of Noah's flood. According to the biblical narrative, Noah became drunk and uncovered himself in his tent. Ham, one of Noah's sons, saw his father's nakedness and told his two brothers, Shem and Japheth, about it. Shem and Japheth, in contrast to Ham, covered their father without looking at him. When Noah woke up and learned what had happened, he pronounced a curse upon Canaan, who was Ham's son. The exact nature of the curse is not explicitly described in the biblical text. However, it is commonly interpreted as a curse that would affect Canaan and his descendants, leading to servitude or subjugation. This curse has been understood by some interpreters to explain the conflicts between the Israelites and the Canaanites when the Israelites later entered the land of Canaan. It is important to note that the curse of Canaan has been misused historically to justify racism and the oppression of African peoples. This misinterpretation and misapplication of the curse is unjust and has no basis in the biblical text. The curse was specific to Canaan and his descendants, not to all Africans or any other racial or ethnic group. It is crucial to approach biblical texts with careful consideration of their historical and cultural contexts and to avoid using them to promote discrimination or prejudice. The Bible, when properly understood, contains valuable teachings that emphasize love, justice, and the dignity of all people.